All right. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Patriotic Dragon program. The program to bring open, honest, thoughtful conversation back. The views on the Patriotic Dragon radio are those of the guests and not necessarily those of the radio station WYYZ, the Republican Party, and our sponsor this month is the nail salons in Jasper on Main Street, Tony and Helen Wynn, and Victor's Nail Salons on North Main Street, as well as their location at Foothills at Solar Nails. Stop by and see Tony and Helen and look at it's that time to start looking at tanning for the spring, for spring break and all those type things. So stop by and see them at both locations. Our guest this week is Roger Fitzpatrick. Roger is running for the 9th Congressional District, which we are fortunate to have be on the western edge of the district. And Roger, thank you for being on with us.
Oh, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. What I'd like to start out with is give us a little bit of your background. I know people that maybe have been to your website and everything have seen some of it, but just kind of give us your background.
I am a lifelong member of White County, born and raised there. I'm 56 years old, and so I've lived there my entire life. Went to the White County school system and then graduated from high school there, joined the Marine Corps, and spent 6 years in the active reserves. And then during that time in the reserves, got my college education in education, and became a teacher. In White County, stayed in the White County school system my entire career, and then retired in 2012 as elementary school principal.
Oh, okay.
So, and then since retirement, I've stayed in education. Started working with Mountain Education Charter High School. Don't know if you're familiar with that, but we actually have a site here in Pickens County.
Yes, we do.
And I find that it is a fantastic opportunity for those students that don't seem to fit the mold of traditional day school. Yep. And it's a great opportunity for those students to get their high school education and get on with their life. So I'm currently working in Habersham County and White County at their sites as a site director.
Oh, as site director.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah, well, and it's interesting because of all the candidates that I've interviewed and talked to this cycle as far as the year goes here locally on the Board of Education and some other areas, education background seems to be a strong pull. And in fact, I've been on Facebook with a couple of our Board of Education members the last 2 days debating issues over how the board needs to be run and that type of thing. So I imagine you've got a different perspective than what I would call a lifelong politician would have as far as that goes.
In fact, in 2014, I was elected to the White County Board of Education. And unfortunately, I had to resign last Friday. Because in running for the congressional seat, the state constitution says that I have to resign. So effective last Friday, I resigned. And at the time when I was serving on the board, I was the only former educator serving on the board. And I feel like that perspective is necessary. Yeah. On any school board. Yeah,
and we've got, of course, 5-person board here, and we're dealing with exactly that. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the debates that me and one of the former BOE members, who was not an educator, and one of the current BOE members that weighed in on a conversation that I'd had. So, I think it's always been critical, but I think it's more critical now that we're having to deal with the federal and then therefore the state mandates with the Common Core and the testing. And I know being on the Board of Education, because I looked at their code of ethics and I've seen their, quote, bylaws, and I don't think people and citizens and parents realize just how tied the Board of Education members are as far as what they can discuss, their opinions and that type of thing. So,
and that's exactly right. The power of a local board of education is extremely limited. First of all, by whatever the state says. The legislature, they pass laws all the time that dictate what the Board of Education can and cannot do, and then you put on top of that what the federal government has done. with the No Child Left Behind, and then with the more recent the Student Success Act.
Yeah.
But the local Board of Education is very limited, and I'm of the opinion that those who know best for the local students it's the local Board of Education.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so if I think that the federal government, Washington, doesn't know how Pickens County students need to be educated.
Yeah, much less North Georgia and what industries need.
Exactly. At most, I think that the state needs to be involved. But ideally, the ideal situation would be that local Board of Education has great latitude to be able to educate their own students.
Right.
And, my perspective is this: if we come up with the absolute best education system that would rival anywhere in not only the state, not only the nation, but even the world, then we can be absolutely the first in terms of job creation, in terms of earning potential, in terms of being great citizens, involved people in the everyday life of this county, of this country, of the state. But unfortunately, we don't have the latitude to be able to do everything that we can.
Sure. Yeah, we actually had, and you may know her name, Meg Norris.
I do.
With United opt out. And as I started, I knew she was going to be on the program, and I started doing some research on it. And I'd met her at the GLP convention in Athens, and her group was formulating themselves at that point. And then when SB 355 dropped and that type of thing, I mean, it was a whirlwind. And I just happened to be down at the Capitol for some other things at the same time, and got to see that interplay, and it's that old adage, you follow the money.
Exactly.
And I actually met the second person that I've ever met that actually acknowledged they were a member of ALEC while I was down there. Okay. And it was I overheard him introduce himself to somebody else as being with that group. Because it's amazing the influence that they have. I've been fortunate in what I do for a living other than the radio program that I've worked with 5 southern states. I've worked from Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia. So I've seen the education in Mississippi, but I've also seen that race to the top influence what Tennessee did and how phenomenal their secondary and post-secondary education is. And, Governor Bridison, he was a Democrat, but he understood what his state needed, and the Republican governors in there now, they've carried through with it. And you see it. You see it from 2007 forward. The economy was a blip on the screen for Tennessee, and it's because they were investing in education and jobs that were coming to the state, and that was the driver. And when you see that success, and you see another state that we live in that can't emulate it, right? And if anything, they fight against it.
And why can't we emulate? At the very minimum, emulate what is the best out there. Why can't Georgia do that?
Yeah.
But I would even go further, and why can't we be even better than?
Yeah, absolutely.
And develop our own curriculum. One of the problems of late in education is it's an absolute top-down hierarchy. Absolutely. Where Washington is telling Georgia what they ought to do, especially with the Common Core curriculum, the race to the top. Yep. And if Georgia is left up to their own freedom to be able to develop their own curriculum and make sure it's the best, so that all the other states in the country say, oh, I want to be like Georgia. And then it's not a competition as such, but it is everybody wants to be the best, and the ones that receive the payoff are the students, the families, the communities, the state, the nation. So everybody wins when we have the best education possible, and the only way we're going to do that is if we have the freedom to be able to develop the best, instead of doing what some trade organization like the National Governors Association or National State School Superintendents. We can do our job if we're allowed to do it. And one of the problems that we have is the high stakes testing.
Yes.
There's way too much pressure on the students, way too much pressure on the teachers, way too much pressure on all the staff to make sure that we meet whatever benchmarks that somebody outside of this state set for us. And it's when I got into education, it was an absolute joy to be able to work with students, and if it was necessary to deal with something that was germane to the day, then I had the freedom to be able to do that. Whereas today, if it's not a standard that has to be addressed on some test that we're going to take later on, teachers don't have time to be able to deal with real life situations. And and I'll have to say this: education played a role in the United States becoming the greatest nation in the face of the earth.
Absolutely.
And so we did it right,
Yeah.
at least in some point in our history. And so why are we getting away from that? Why are we getting away from a formula that actually worked?
Right.
In doing something that I think is actually detrimental to the well-being of local communities, the state, and even the nation.
Yeah. And honestly, what I feel like is from the state representatives, state senators, and especially our congressmen from the state in a position that you're looking to be in, they're not well versed, so therefore I think they take advice and have for at least 40 years from outside groups that present themselves as being factual and correct, and Common Core being a key thing there. I was really surprised at the lack of evidentiary evidence to support the claims for what we're asking our teachers and, more importantly, our students to do. And on the other side of it, when you look at the way you're talking about the stress levels, all the different psychological effects that are documented, that are shown, and not just by one or two colleges, but by universities and colleges and school systems across the nation. I regret that Richard Wood didn't run for state superintendent before and he'd be able to head it off, because I support him 100%, and I know he's getting a lot of pushback at the state level, but he's trying to do what's right.
He's doing the best that he can, because he has to deal with the Board of Education.
Right.
He has to deal with the governor's office. He has to deal with the state legislature.
No.
And so he is one voice, a powerful voice, but he is one voice in a sea of other voices,
Right.
and powerful voices.
Yes.
And in the state of Georgia, the governor's office is extremely powerful. The State Board of Education, if they don't want to go along with what the superintendent wants to do, then his hands are tied. He cannot issue executive orders to be able to do what he thinks is best. And and I don't know that I necessarily want him to.
No, but
we need to have people in those positions of influence, of authority, to be able to do what's right without having their own preset agenda of what they want to do.
Right.
Let's have the agenda that's what's best for our students, what's best for our communities, what's best for everybody.
Right.
The 10 million people plus that live in the state of Georgia. Let's have that as our agenda.
Yeah.
And without any personal agenda thrown in there.
Yeah. Yeah. And from your standpoint, you win the 9th district, and you're put in as our new congressman for the 9th. What are things that you have, if you have a 100-day plan or whatever, what do you see yourself accomplishing as the 9th district?
Well, I don't have a 100-day plan, but what I see is almost an all-powerful national government that was never designed to be like that. I am of the belief that our founders gave us the greatest form of government, that, at least in modern times, that this world has ever seen, and it was a limited national government. If you are honest in your readings of what the founders said, the federal government is one of enumerated powers, which means that you can count whatever the powers are that the federal government has. I taught a class to some 9th graders in White County last year using a book called The 5,000-Year Leap. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it lays out the 28 principles that really was combined to form this country. And, it lists the different things that each branch of government is responsible for. And the legislature, they only had like 18 to 20 different responsibilities. powers.
Yeah.
The presidency only had 6 things, 6 areas that he or she could do. The Supreme Court only had 11 different types of cases that they could hear. And so it's spelled out in the Constitution. And then when you look at the 10th Amendment, and it says that if it's granted to the federal government, fantastic. But if it's not granted to the federal government, it's reserved to the states.
Reserved to the states.
And so if it's not spelled out, it is a state responsibility. And over the past couple of 100 years, what we've seen is a national government that has overstepped its bounds more and more and more, it seems like, with each day that goes by. So in terms of what I would like to accomplish when I get into Congress, I would like to work with those who are like-minded to begin with, to form a coalition, to be able to get our government, our national government, back to the way it was originally intended. And that will be a hard row to hoe, because we have gotten so far away. But as the old adage goes, you eat an elephant one bite at a time. And so every step that we can take in that direction will be a positive one. You look at even this spending bill that Congress voted on this past December. Several things in there that are just the government shouldn't have been involved in.
Right.
But that was so antithetical to what this country is all about. We're sitting here with a $19 trillion debt, growing by leaps and bounds with every year. And our Congress is proud that they've cut the deficit to $500 billion a year.
Yeah.
And even at that rate, how long is it before we hit 20 trillion? How long is it going to be before we hit 30 trillion? And we're already over 100% of our gross national product. And so that we cannot continue on at that sustained rate. So one of the first things that I would like to work with is getting our spending under control, so that not only can we start having a balanced budget, but we can start paying our debt down, because it's going to pass on to our children, it's going to pass on to our grandchildren. And I don't want to leave this country in a worse condition than what I received it.
Right.
And so, working with spending would be definitely a first thing that I would want to work with the next budget. Never should have another omnibus type spending bill. I think that you need to split it up into the 12 spending bills that it's supposed to be, and make sure that those things that are in those spending bills are only what the federal government is supposed to be spending money on. And not just anything because the federal government says that, we need to do this.
Right.
But it needs to be specific to what the founders said. This is what you need to be working on.
Yeah.
You've got to work in that direction. You won't be able to change it overnight. But it's going to be a step-by-step process.
Yeah.
And we've got to elect people to go up to Washington to represent us.
Yes.
That will do what the Constitution says. That will do what the founders said that we need to do in order to be able to remain a strong and viable nation, a leader in the world. And it's going to be a tough process, but it's one that's attainable. I have hope that we can turn this nation around and, again, be that bright and shining city on a hill that we were originally intended to be.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that we're seeing across the board in the political spectrum, whether it's on a national level, a state, or local, is people want to get back to what worked for that first 180 years.
Exactly.
And because that's things you start looking back and you can see when the wheels started coming off of things, and it is all tied to two things: allowing the federal government to become the babysitter, and states, giving up those rights to support themselves. Exactly. and everybody can talk about state by state trade, all these different items, but. And I always come back to the Obamacare, the Unaffordable Care Act.
Exactly.
If we had taken those people who were at the bottom of the rung, who didn't have access to it, and put them onto a Medicare or some program similar to that, and left the rest of us alone, and then taken the insurance company's ability to sell across state lines, we could have controlled, and we could have opened up access to more of the specialized medical care that's needed. That way you wouldn't have the situation where you've got people moving to Colorado or traveling back and forth for what they deem to be a solution for their autistic children and different things like that. And that's still something that like could be done. You can unwind certain things, and that's what it's going to take is dissecting each of the overreaches and take out what we can control. And then from the spending standpoint, I'm sure you've started to study, if you haven't been on some of the plans that have been out there, whether it's fair tax, flat tax, penny plan, what plans have you looked at, and what are your thoughts on some of those budgetary?
Well, I'm leaning toward the fair tax, and I read the book by, oh gosh, its name escapes me now.
John Linder. Yeah.
The fair tax, and it makes perfect sense, because what it sets forth is I get to keep 100% of whatever it is I earned. And that's really what this nation was one of the things it was founded on. You work hard, and you receive your just fruits for what you do.
Right.
And then I determine how it is that I'm going to spend my money, and therefore contribute to the coffers of the state government, of the federal government. But the way it is right now, I have no choice, really, in how much money I have to give to government, because those that are in government dictate to me my tax rates, what I can deduct, what I can't deduct. But if we implement the fair tax, I think that would be the most fair way to be able to get the federal government a little bit off of the dole.
Right.
And let the citizens take over. And be responsible for what they contribute.
Right. Well, and I think two things: to work toward a fair tax or flat tax type platform, and then that every state of the union have a balanced budget amendment.
I'm not aware of a state that doesn't. I know Georgia does.
Yeah, Georgia does.
Georgia absolutely has to have a constitutional, a balanced budget because of the Constitution. And there may be states I'm not familiar with.
Well, and they may have a balanced budget amendment, but what I've started to find out, and as I've looked at other states and being fortunate to work in those 5 southern states, if we decide to set up a special district inside of Georgia that's, quote, not on the tax rolls, even though it receives taxes, it's not reported. It doesn't have to respond to. It can be for a city fountain and a walking trails. That can be a special district, and it takes it out of that tax allocation and the responsibility and oversight. Right now, I think the last count, I just was reading on this last night, there were over 3,000 special tax districts in the United States. So 600 per state. In those districts, there's some of them that are as few members as 4 people. Some of them only have 2. And they're over a certain part of the city or a county or an airport authority. They have no budgetary restraints. Whatever tax money they get, they allocate it and spend however they want to. So they turn around and then they have the ability to apply for grants, which we sent our money to Washington, D.C., and they reallocated to a grant in South Texas to an airport authority that is for local people to use. Has nothing to do with commerce, state-by-state trade, or anything else. Those kind of things, I think, are part of what needs to be reined in as well. Right. Is the tax money that we are forfeiting and giving to the federal government, how it's done. And if all the states had to balance their budget and entities like these special districts came under scrutiny and had to show where the money's going, what's the purpose of it, and what's your 5-year, 10-year, those type plans, I think there'd be a lot of people, it'd probably keep our Attorney General busy.
Well, I'll tell you start messing with things like that, you're going to get people mad at you.
There's a saying in the Air Force, was a combat command officer, if you're receiving flak, you're probably on the target.
There you go.
So.
But that's just another example of at least the federal government being in places that it ought not be.
Yeah.
Because, if we go back to just those powers that the Constitution delegates to the federal government to be involved in, the federal government owns way too much land.
Far too much.
Never intended. If you look at a strict reading of the Constitution, we've got way too much land that's taxpayer owned. It really should be belonging to, at the most, to the individual states. But I would suggest to individuals.
Right.
because even as the Declaration set forth, we've got certain inalienable rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and that pursuit of happiness refers to ownership of property.
All right.
And so, we need to start reining in all of those things. But again, it goes back to the federal government has for, I would say almost from the beginning of this nation, has attempted to step outside the bounds of the Constitution. And I'll say that in 1798 we had the Alien and Sedition Acts.
Yes.
That were very unconstitutional, but here we had a Congress that signed it, or that passed it, and a president that signed it.
Yeah.
And the only way it was stopped is that some of those states said we're not going to abide by it.
Yeah.
And but even from 1798, we've had the federal government wanting to expand.
All right.
That has especially happened, in the 20th century.
Yeah.
But we've got to rein it in.
Yep. And well, I have a question that I ask every candidate for whatever office that comes on here, and I'll ask the coroner when he's on with me next week. We got candidates for coroner. If you were elected, what's your stand on term limits?
Term limits are unconstitutional. First of all, let me say that. Now, if there was an attempt to have a constitutional amendment to provide term limits, then I would be in favor of it. Mm-hmm. Back in the day, we had people that went into public service, and they did it for a period of time, and then they went back home, and they did whatever it was that their vocation was, and it worked.
Yeah.
But since at least the middle of the 20th century, we've had the development of career politicians, and there's that has been one of the detriments to this country, because the whole development of the Washington, D.C. bubble, where you've got all that power that resides because people have been in office for 50 years.
Yeah.
So I am in favor of term limits, but it's going to have to be done the right way. Now, ideally, what we would need to have is one of two things. One, either the representatives or senators or themselves limit themselves. That would be ideal.
Self-imposed term limit.
Self-imposed.
Yeah.
The second thing would be that, short of that, would be that the citizens impose term limits. And that means that we've got to have an informed electorate, an electorate that really cares about what's going on in government, right. and not just what I can get out of it. Not just what my representative can do for me, but really what's best for the country. And that might mean that I don't get what I want, but it's best for the country if we have a change in Washington and whoever the representative or the senator is. So one of those two things would be the easiest thing to do. I really doubt with the atmosphere that you see in Washington that you'll ever see Congress propose a constitutional amendment and then send it out to the states. Personally, I'll term limit myself. At the absolute most, it would be 10 years in the House. Right. And if I were ever privileged to be in the Senate, at most 2 terms in the Senate. So I would term limit myself.
Right. And that's I think that's honestly the way to look at it, because that's the one that takes the least amount of wrangling and the least amount of legislative effort would be for people to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. So it'd be statesmen. And stateswomen.
And I'll tell you what, we need more statesmen rather than politicians.
Absolutely.
Because a statesman cares most about what's good for the country.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a politician, I think, has more of the idea of what's best for me, what's best for my career, what can I get out of it. Right. And we've got way too many of those. We've got some statesmen in Congress right now, but they're few and far between.
Right.
And so the citizens need to really vet the candidates and find out who's going to be a statesman, who's going to serve, rather than to go in there with self-serving interest.
Yeah. I was actually talking to a youth group, young kids at a technical college in Tennessee just in the last 30 days, and one of them asked me about politics, and one thing led to another, and we started talking about it, and he said, describe a statesman to me. I said, I'll give you an example. I said, someone who believes so strongly in the point that they're trying to make it, and the argument that they're presenting to their colleagues, who would stand on the floor of the Senate for 22 hours. That's a statesman. That's not a politician.
Does anybody come to mind when you say that?
Yeah, there's one.
There is one.
Yeah, and that's, good or bad if you agree with it, but that's when you have somebody who believes in the Constitution, is willing to do something like that.
Exactly.
That's the kind of person that we should be looking for. Whoever the nominee is for president, same thing. I ask everybody this, and I know what my position is. In the Republican Party, we're going through some tough times, and I think we brought them all on ourselves.
I agree with that. I agree.
Whoever the nominee is, will you support that nominee?
Absolutely. Any of the four that are remaining in the race would be infinitely better than either an avowed socialist or I hope soon to be indicted liar.
Yep.
Really, if you look at the turnout that you've had in the primaries, the interest in the Republican primaries is just record-setting, whereas the interest in the Democratic primaries is dismal at best.
Yeah,
I see, while I don't like all of the rhetoric that's been going on in the debates and in the advertising, what I see is that there is a tremendous interest in this race, at least on the Republican side. And say what you might about Donald Trump, he has stirred the pot.
Yes.
And he is getting people to come out and vote and be interested in this race. So I'll give him kudos for that, even though I may not necessarily agree with everything that he's saying.
Right.
Personally, I'm an originalist. I think that those that we elect to any office needs to adhere to the original intent of the Constitution as best as they possibly can. Donald Trump doesn't necessarily follow that into that mold. In fact, there's one that comes closest.
All right.
Of the three, that's the one I'm supporting.
Right.
Ted Cruz. I'll just go ahead and say it. Ted Cruz. That's the one I'm supporting right now. The one I voted for.
Yeah.
But we've got to have those, especially in the presidency, that understand the Constitution and the limits that are placed on that office. The president doesn't have the latitude to issue any executive order that he wants to. I mean, he's bound by the Constitution, just like everybody else is.
And bound by more things than just the Constitution.
Yeah, absolutely.
And abusing most of those. So, to come kind of back down to Georgia, in the 9th District, I mean, you're in the heart of it there in White County and the Cleveland and the mountain areas there. What do you see that you would be your focus in the 9th District as a congressman for the entire area that you'd like to see changed, improved, that would be your focus?
I don't know that I would do anything that is special for just the 9th District, but that it wouldn't also be good for every other district in the country. One of the major problems that everybody is facing is the economy. I was listening to the radio the other day, and it was talking about the Hall County unemployment rate ticked up at 4.4%, and I think it's sitting at like 4.9%. The national unemployment rate's hovering around 5%, which I think is a joke, because if you consider all those that are either unemployed or underemployed, and this is the laughable part of it, if you don't look for work anymore, you're not unemployed.
I know.
I just really don't understand how they can get away with that.
And I actually figured that out. And it just was one of those epiphanies. And it was when I was talking to this group about in Tennessee, and we started talking about unemployment and the fact that it was only one young lady pointed out it was only 4.7% in Tennessee that way. And I said, take the number of citizens that you have who are of working age, 65 and under, and over 18. Take that total number. I said, then multiply times the 4.4 that you're talking about. I said, if that math doesn't work out, I said, that's what's wrong with Common Core math.
Exactly.
I said, it's wrong. I said, you can't take 93 million people out of work and say out of 300 million that it's only 4.9.
Right.
That's just math that doesn't work.
93 million is, pushing a third.
Yeah, I think
Of
pretty
the
much
population
pretty
here?
much all the math
Yeah.
that I studied growing up, so that comes somewhere close to 30%.
It does,
So-
and so I guess I was being generous when I was. I've been saying that it's probably closer to 15%.
I think it's probably at least 15% who are unemployed and do want to work.
Mhm.
There's that other 33, 34% that if you offered them a job, they wouldn't take it.
Exactly.
Because they've been indoctrinated into the idea that somebody will catch them, that there's a net there, and that they don't know where the net comes from. They don't know where the money comes from.
Well, they don't care where the money comes from.
And I think it's somewhat been educated out of them to care. I think they just think that that's their entitlement.
And it's always going to be there.
It's always going to be there.
Right.
Because we don't teach economics
Mhm.
anymore in schools for the most part. I was so pleased my daughter, she had a phenomenal education here in Pickens County and graduated salutatorian of her class. Went on a full ride to Alabama. Her senior year when she was getting a business minor along with her biology major. She took macro and microeconomics, and she came home and we had some of the best talks on economy and economics and everything that we ever had. Never had it growing up when she was in high school because they didn't cover it. And she was in AP classes,
Wow.
but they didn't. She really understood it by the time she was 22.
But back to your question. So anything that we can do to help create jobs in the 9th District, at least at the national level, would also benefit whatever would be in the 10th or the 14th or in other states. So we've got to lower the tax burden, I think, for businesses. Over and over and over, we see businesses that are closing their doors in the United States and moving their operations overseas or to Mexico or somewhere else. And so what we've got to do is we've got to make it so that they can come back to the United States without being penalized. We've got one of the highest corporate tax rates in the world. So let's lower the corporate tax rates because if the whole idea is, well, they're making money, let's tax them so that we can fund whatever it is that we're doing. But you're biting off your nose to spite your face. If we create a business atmosphere in the 9th District, whereas businesses want to be in the 9th District, then that's going to create jobs. And when you create jobs, then you're going to be able to draw. Even if we don't have the right working force in the 9th District, then you're going to draw quality people into the area.
Right.
That's going to boost the economy because the more people that you have that are having good earnings, well, they're going to spend more.
That's right.
That's going to increase the tax base. I'm sure that Pickens County has an education splost.
Yes,
Well,
we
the
do.
more that you spend, I don't know of any county that doesn't, but the more that you spend, the more that goes into education, the more that goes into the splosh that the county government has. And so you're going to be able to do more, but also the private businesses. If you spend more, then the local businesses are going to be able to do better. They're going to be able to not just survive, but thrive. So we've got to have better policies that encourage entrepreneurship, that encourage businesses to come back to the United States, to settle in the United States, to be productive in the United States. And in that way, everybody benefits. When you've got a sufficient amount of business in the country to where everybody has an opportunity to be employed, then that is good for the United States.
Right.
And so working on those policies that really are detrimental to the well-being of this country business-wise, I think is one of the things that we could do.
Right. And something I like to talk about and bring up is, of course, we're in a position with the Supreme Court, and those are going to be critical votes, and hopefully the Republicans that are currently there will hold their stand and not cave, and we'll wait till we have a new executive officer, and hopefully it'll be somebody that we can actually deal with instead of being dictated to from.
Well, let me address that.
Yeah.
The Constitution says that it is the responsibility of the president to nominate, and then it is the responsibility of the Senate to advise and consent. Okay, so if the president nominates, when I heard on the radio coming over here that he's narrowed his choices down to 3 or 4, so he's got a short list there. So if he nominates, well, I see absolutely no problem with the Senate holding hearings, because that is the Senate's responsibility. But if that nominee's record if the comments that nominee would make during the hearings do not line up with the original intent of the Constitution, then vote them down. Back in the day, it was common for nominees, regardless of who didn't place the nomination, which party nominated the individual, to pass out of the Senate to 98-2, or just overwhelmingly for that nominee.
Right.
But we've got to get to the place to where we actually look at who the nominee is, what the record is, what are the rulings that this individual has issued, what are the opinions that individual has issued, and say, does it line up with the Constitution? If it does, then fantastic, here we go. But if it doesn't, then vote the individual down. So I understand the whole idea of we're just not going to hold hearings at all. Mm-hmm. But if you think about it, that's not constitutional.
No.
To not hold hearings. So I really think that the Republican leadership in the Senate needs to hold the hearings, but they need to vote them down if they don't line up with the original intent of the Constitution. And given the president's track record with who he's nominated before, I would say that odds are that nominee should be voted down.
Right. Yeah, and I agree with you with the fact that you said the key word there, leadership.
Yes.
On the Republican side. To make the case on the front end of it of these are the things that we're looking for in a nominee. Mm-hmm. So, Mr. President, if you're going to send us a nominee that meets that criteria,
exactly,
then we're all for it, and state the case emphatically. Then let him present them, have the hearings, and then stand on the grounds of what you're looking for. Make their case for why they voted for that nominee or voted that nominee down, and it not be because they're up for re-election in November.
Right.
And that's the crux of it.
It is. And if you look at some of the comments that some of the senators have made years ago, Joe Biden, current vice president, during and this was even before the election year, he made the statement that President Bush should not have any nominees confirmed. And this was like in June of the year before the election year. Right. So the rhetoric that is coming from the Democratic Party is the absolute opposite of what they're saying now.
Right.
That it's the Republican Party is being obstructionist and won't do what's constitutional. It's like, since when did they become concerned with what's constitutional? Yeah. But
every time I hear talking heads telling me that if we want to have a good, strong Republican Party, we need to do these certain things, I always think 180 degrees out from whatever they say.
Absolutely.
Because when Joe Scarborough tells me I need to change something to make the Republican Party stronger,
right.
That's a warning bell for me. Mm-hmm. So
yeah.
Yeah. Well, now as far as your website, that type of thing, how have you got it set up? You have a website and Facebook?
I have a website, have Facebook. The website is Fitzpatrick4Congress.com, 4 being the digit 4.
Okay. Good.
So Fitzpatrick4Congress.com. I have a Facebook page, and again, it's Fitzpatrick4Congress. And then also have my email. If you're interested in emailing me, it's roger@fitzpatrickforcongress.com. And then I have a cell phone number, and so call me if you want to talk to me. Give me a call. This is my number, 706-892-7987. Carry it in my pocket all the time.
All right. And as far as events, meet and greets, that type of thing that you've got planned going forward, what have you got?
Well, right now we're working on trying to put together some fundraiser events, and this is the part that I really hate about the whole process. The one that I'm running against has over $400,000 in his campaign fund, and it takes money to win an election. But the message that I believe that I have is the message that this country needs. But the only way that that message is going to get out to the voters, those that need to hear it, is if I have sufficient funds to be able to get it out there.
Right.
And so you can go to my webpage, make donations. And you can mail it to me. My mailing address is P.O. Box 2567, Cleveland, Georgia 30528. If you want to mail me a check, but unfortunately, it takes funds to be able to get the message out there. Because otherwise, the incumbent is going to just send out mailings that touts what he's done. And he's done some good. I'll tell you, I'll give him credit for that. But he's done some, especially here of late, that's just egregious.
Right.
Antithetical to the constitutional conservative principles of the 9th District.
Yeah, and with the 9th District being the most conservative in Georgia,
exactly.
and one of the most conservative in the
top 3 in the nation.
Yeah.
Is what I understand.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
So
definitely the first in Georgia. So.
Yeah.
So I would appreciate donations, and also I feel like mine is a grassroots movement. Anybody that wants to support me, then they go talk to their friends. Go and talk to those that you have any kind of influence on, and talk to them about what I stand for. Go to my website, look to see go to my Facebook page, look to see what I stand for. Give me a call, talk to me, and I'll tell you exactly what I stand for. Ask me any question, I'll give you my answer. But go talk to your friends and talk to them about voting for me on May 24th. And remember, the primary is May 24th. We've got to have everybody in the 9th District go out and vote on that day, or at least during early voting. And let's make sure that we send somebody to Washington that's actually going to represent the best interest of the 9th District.
Right. Well, I want to go ahead right now, and in full disclosure, most of my listeners know, but I'm vice chair for membership for the Pickens County GOP. As well. So I have multiple hats.
Yes, you do.
May 5th, here in Jasper, we're going to have the Pickens County Young Business Leaders, Young Business Professionals. We're having a meet and greet at the Carriage House. I'd like to invite you to that, 7 to 9 p.m.
Is that a Thursday evening?
Yep, Thursday evening. And so we're looking forward to that event. And please put it on your calendar, and please come back.
I will.
All right.
Thank you.
Roger, thank you for being on.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
And come back as you move forward, and let us know what's going on with the campaign.
I'd love to be back on the radio as things heat up even further.
Absolutely.
So that'd be great.
All right. Thank you. Well, welcome everybody again to the Patriotic Dragon, and just some notes from the show today. This coming Saturday, March 19th, at the Community Center on Camp Road, will be the Pickens County GOP County Convention. You have to be there and be registered, be in line to be registered prior to 9 o'clock. After 9 o'clock, the doors will close for the convention. So we'll be there and ready to start taking people in at 8 a.m. on Saturday the 19th, again at the Community Center on Camp Road. And just to give everybody an update from Friday, qualifying was the end of qualifying for the county elections, and so far all the candidates, unless somebody writes in for the county commissioners, Bill Newton has qualified on the Republican Party ticket. Rob Jones, our current incumbent chairman, has qualified to run again. And the county commissioner, District 2, which is on the east side of the county, Becky Denny has qualified. For the clerk of Superior Court, Jennifer Edwards Jordan has qualified. For the coroner's position, Kevin Roper is retiring and not going to be running again. And Bradley McKinney has qualified, as well as Mark Godfrey. Both of those gentlemen have qualified for the coroner's position. For the judge of the probate court, our Honorable Judge David Lindsay, is qualified. And for the sheriff, Donnie Craig, our incumbent sheriff, has qualified again. On the tax commissioner, Sharon Troglin is retiring December 31st this coming year. And for the tax commissioners, Darren Satterfield has qualified, as well as David Leister. So for the Board of Education, Post 1, looks like we're going to have an active competition here for the Board of Education. In Post 1, Larry Cantrell from Jasper, Catherine White from Jasper, and the incumbent Mike Cowart from Jasper have all qualified for Board of Education Post 1. Board of Education Post 4, where Miss Andrews, Peggy Andrews, has been the incumbent. Peggy is not running, and Sue Finley from Jasper has qualified for Post 4. And the Chief Magistrate, Honorable Judge Alan Wigington, has qualified for that office. So that kind of gives you an idea on the qualifiers of the candidates and for the upcoming election. So, again, just want to reiterate the Saturday, March 19th, is the Pickens County Convention. At that county convention, there will be delegates nominated to the 9th and the 14th district convention. And then at the district convention, the delegates for the state convention will be named. So you've got to go through that process. If you plan on going to Augusta for the state convention, you need to be at the Pickens County Convention to start with. So please bring your photo ID, your information, and make sure that you're a current member of the Pickens County Republican Party. We'll be still taking those dues and signing up people for the Republican Party as well on Saturday morning. So again, thank y'all for listening to the Patriotic Dragon radio program, and we will see you next week. Have a great weekend.